Hello, everybody. I'm here with Samy again. She's one of the healers that I have been collaborating for a long time, and we have developed this very intimate and very profound relationship when it comes to understanding topics, deep topics about the mind, behaviors, relationships, and you name it. So she's here with me again. Her name is Samy. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce her name, her real name, but I'll have that on your video profile. So, Samy is a healer, meditation coach, certified hypnotherapist, a member of the American Hypnosis Association, instructor at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, and speaker. So, I know I probably have asked you this question before, but I'll ask you again. How did you discover hypnotherapy?
Hypnotherapy was one of the modalities that I was studying as a way to create change. And I had been studying, inner child and NLP and cognitive behavioral therapy, just almost like shortcuts to the mind. But when I discovered hypnotherapy, it appealed to me more because it was really good at silencing that left brain that doesn't let us create long-term change, because the left brain is all about maintaining what we already know. So hypnosis seemed like the best way to tap into the right brain, which is where novelty and change actually happens.
Right. And when you say the right brain, Samy, do you mean the subconscious? Is that the same thing? Oh, it's different. Somehow
Yes,
different.
I mean, more or less, when you think of the subconscious, I mean, there's going to be other some parts of the left brain that are involved within the subconscious, but more or less it's the right brain that, it thinks in terms of symbols, doesn't care about language, cares more about expression, deeper meanings, big picture. So that's what animals are tapped into. So that's more or less our subconscious.
Right. So kind of, but it's associated. They are close together. Another question that I have for you, I've read in your bio, you help clients, people to turn negative patterns into positive habits. So how do you do that with hypnotherapy?
So part of hypnotherapy is also some of the discovery work that we do in the beginning of each session. And so part of it is discovering not just what patterns they have that they'd like to break, but how they develop them. Because the whole idea behind any habit or any pattern or any behavior that we cling to is because at some point in our lives it was helpful. So if we had, for instance, very abusive parents and cowering down was the only way to survive the situation, now we may find ourselves cowering down even when there's no need. So we have to figure out what that behavior was. If procrastination, for instance, saved us from, failure at one time because it was too painful, let's just say we had too many critical people around us. So now we don't even take small chances. So we have to know why that pattern exists, not just what it is and just go straight to changing it. We have to see the useful purpose it's serving. So that's a big part of the discovery. After we've discovered it, then we move into reframing that belief. We do some parts work, which is we tend to discover which part of them wants one thing and which part of them is resisting them. And then we can actually bring those two parts together and get some kind of almost like a negotiation process. And this all happens during hypnosis. It's very effective. And that's usually how you can create the fastest change.
I mean, I have talked to you for so long now about hypnotherapy, and I became interested myself, but I never done any sessions, not yet, because it really feels like that's true. Sometimes it feels like it's a conflict between parts, as you just named, and I have talked to other people that do part work specifically, and they explained to me how that worked. So it does feel like that sometimes. Is there a moment where we find ourselves feeling whole, where all these parts come together in harmony and they are listening to one another? Is something that really happens, Samy? And what does it look like when it happens?
So absolutely, yes. What it looks like, well, let me first share with you what it doesn't look like, right? So what happens when two parts are in conflict? So if we have, so often I get people for, relationships, and it's always this there's this one part of me that wants to leave him because he's so emotionally neglectful or emotionally abusive, but another part of me is scared to leave. So we'll find that anytime there is an inability to do something that feels right, there's two parts involved. There's the part of us that maybe is afraid of abandonment or is afraid of change. And then there's another part of us that are like, oh my God, this is so bad for me. I want to leave this. That's more of the, higher thinking, more of the left brain thinking, but the right brain might be afraid or terrified of being alone. So that's what it looks like when the two are in conflict. When the two are aligned, how you were talking about, that's what it feels like when you effortlessly do something that you feel like is good for you and feels joyful. So when you take a nice, relaxing trip with your family, that decision to do that is something that all parts of you are in agreement over, right? When you get a really good night's sleep, that's something where your brain's not trying to sabotage you, and it's allowing you to get sleep. So those types of things are where you would really feel the alignment, where you don't question yourself, you do that behavior, it feels good and it's good for you. And that's where we want to get to with some of these conflicted parts in hypnotherapy as well.
Right. So it sounds like there's no doubts. It's that state of being that we are not doubting ourselves in any way. And that sounds wonderful to me, not to doubt. But as you know, for me, it always goes back to spirituality because I have a hard time kind of not just trusting, but because I hear the conversations in my head, so I can't really listen to that all the time. So I have not detached, but I have learned to listen those thoughts to them and let them then go. I don't engage with them. And that I call it spiritual awareness. So I'm not sure if this is what I'm doing, if this is exactly what it is, but it really feels like that I see the conflict still, the doubts, but I don't engage with them. And that helps me to maintain that, let's say, healthy distance. Is that something that you came across?
Yes, in fact, spirituality can be a great way to kind of see the part, witness it, and say, okay, this is obviously a result of my programming. There's all of this noise in my head. I see it. I choose not to associate with it. That's a great way to do it. A lot of people don't have the discipline for this kind of deep spirituality. A lot of people, even if they're spiritual, they have this sort of dichotomy between like myself and something else out there that I'm not connected with. But this is, in my opinion, this kind of spirituality is also very good, like psychologically. We can also, we can do it this way. We can also do it a different way where we not only just hear the noise and detach. That's one way to do it for sure. In hypnotherapy, I like to take another approach where I, if it's too traumatic for the client to go into, then I'll do exactly what you're describing. But if it's things that are not as traumatic, let's say I've asked them on a scale of 1 to 10, how upset or triggering it is. If it's anything under a 5, then not only do we want detachment, but we first look into why that's there. What need is that noisy part of us trying to meet? Because the truth of the matter is that all parts of us are actually doing what they think is healthy, because the survival instinct is so baked into us that we don't knowingly sabotage. That part of us needs direction, it needs guidance. And when we detach, sometimes that part feels abandoned and always keeps coming up. And then it gets a little exhausting, and we can do it like, when we're in our 20s, 30s, 40s, but there comes a point where we're like, oh my God, I don't want to have to always keep this part of me at bay. What can I do, right? Where it's not so noisy all the time. And what we can do is we can get that kind of permanent alignment by listening to it, see what need it's meeting, and taking it along with us, rather than kind of putting it in a dungeon and saying, you're not part of my journey anymore. I'm spiritual. Stay away from me. We want to get it to where it grows up with us. It becomes spiritual with us. So that's those parts of us that haven't been healed, that are still asking for attention. So there's 2 or 3, as you can see, different approaches. The one that you have is great for, being able to, if you're disciplined, to be able to do that. But a lot of times people don't have the energy power to keep it at bay, because it does take a lot of energy. You have to do a lot of personal growth. You have to read a lot. You have to be immersed in that world. And a lot of times people just come to me and they're like, oh, Samy, all of that is great, but I just want something, I want it
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
quicker. I want you
Yeah.
to take care of it. So, I mean, they obviously work with me. I can't do it by myself, but
Right.
more or less, I'm guiding them through the whole process.
Mm. Yeah, that sounds really realistic and true when when you talk about the parts, the conversation in the mind, and then the approach I have of kind of observing them and I engaging with them. But I do engage when they are persistent. If they come up all the time and they keep coming every day, almost 3 days in a row, then I engage with them in a sense of
Hmm.
sitting and just paying attention, listening to them to see what's the message, what am I to do, and then it's kind of interesting to see. But that makes so much sense what you said, Sam. That a lot of times we don't have, yeah, I would say the discipline, the commitment, right, to do these things, kind of pay attention to ourselves, and that's why healers like you and so many other people I come across and I work with, they do this work of guiding people to that place that it's with I mean it's within reach. We all have the body mind with us all the times, but we don't have the tools. So it's really wonderful to have human beings like you and so many other people that I engage with that are doing this work. Thank you. I have to pause almost like in a prayer, a reverence to that, because I do. I mean, my body's like I get goosebumps because what else we're here to do but just uncover ourselves, right? And it's wonderful to have people guides to just show us what the truth is about ourselves. Something else I found on your that's yeah in your bio, there's specialties: anxiety, relationships, sleeping disorders, weight loss, depression, and PTSD, alcohol, love, and sex addictions, trauma reversal, fears, and phobias. So the question I have, what caught my attention was alcohol love. I never heard about that. Did you mean alcohol, comma, love? Because I saw that together. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes, it's missing a comma for sure because the love addiction can actually be stronger than a chemical addiction. So that's one that I really want to distinguish and say that's different from regular relationship problems. Alcohol addiction, love addiction, and sex addiction, along with, other types of addiction, gambling, that I also work with.
Okay, so alcohol, love addiction. Talk to me for a moment about that. We'll be discussing the topic of being loved and feeling feeling hated, which is something that it's really amazing to see that we become comfortable with that idea, with this condition of being hated by others. It doesn't make sense, but it does happen. So, talk to me about love addiction and what love is to you.
So real love, which is what we would see in very healthy parenting, also is is a very nice, delicate mix of, intimacy, co-regulation, a little bit of healthy reliance on each other without completely merging with the other person, still having, your
Mm.
own boundaries, but at the same time, being present for the other person and creating space, creating acceptance, and supporting someone else in their journey to know themselves. Whenever we create a very tight space for someone to exist, for our partner to exist, where we're doing one of two things: either we're projecting all this perfection onto them that they now have to live up to, we're disconnected with them, we're disconnected with the truth of who they are. Happens in a lot of relationships. Or we're constantly judging them and saying, you didn't do this, if you love me you do this. Those things are not love to me. Those things are very desperate attempts to self-regulate our own emotions. I see love as something that feels free, but at the same time, people can come together to really, really share this intimate space.
Mm.
And that's what you would notice past the age of 2 or 3. Our healthy parents would do for us. They give us the freedom to explore, and but at the same time, honor our need to still rely on our parents. So this is the type of, love that I am drawn to, that I believe is healthy.
Right. So, and you mentioned the word freedom. That is interesting to hear because I have been contemplating this idea about what comes first, love or freedom. And then what comes to me is that freedom comes first. And it's almost like freedom from attachment to the parts that you speak of that are trying to do something that are in conflict with what we want really to do in life to achieve our goals. And wow, and definitely freedom from trauma and everything that gets in the way. But then if you go deeper, is also the freedom to let others be, as you said, like a parent, a very good parent, letting people be themselves and just express what they have to express without our judgment getting in the way. And this is not easy to do, right, Sammy? To love in this way, this detached, which is not really a detachment, but it's giving the other the space that they need to be themselves and giving ourselves the space to be ourselves as well. It's almost like going back to ideas that I hold very close to my heart, which is unconditional presence, teachings that are spiritual, that we are the unconditioned presence, this unconditioned awareness. So becoming more of that or manifesting more of that, as I think we talked off record for a minute, it allow us to experience this freedom. And then love is possible. That's what comes to me. Does it make sense to you at all?
Yes, I believe that without really being free ourselves, we cannot give anyone else the space. And the ironic thing is that when we give someone else the space to be exactly who they are, we're actually the ones that are giving ourselves freedom. So I'll give you an
Mm,
example of that. Let's just say I go to a seminar and I'm watching the speakers and I'm feeling very critical of them. I'm like, oh my God, do you see how this woman is dressed? Oh my God, did you see how this person was just like rambling and blah, blah, blah? It is a lot of work that I'm having to do. I'm not giving myself the freedom to just be present. I'm so busy. I'm not able to absorb any information. I'm not able to enjoy anything. So if I just gave them the freedom to do exactly what they were doing, I would actually be giving myself a lot of freedom from all of that. Because
mm,
negative self talk, whether it's towards someone else or directed towards us, is still releasing the stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. We're still in fight or flight because what we're saying essentially is with this kind of environment, I'm not safe because there's so much going on that's wrong and I have to hold it together in my mind by criticizing it, but trying to fix it. So I'm actually taking away love and freedom from myself because I see love and freedom as basically the
mm,
same thing. I don't believe one can exist without the other because we cannot truly liberate anyone if we don't love them first, because it
mm,
takes a lot of love to liberate someone, right? To even liberate ourselves. Um, so they're kind of precursors to each other, but they're also the same thing. So the true freedom, even when we give our own parts, is by love. You'll notice that you said when the voices or the parts are very persistent, you listen. That's a form of love. Listening is a form of love. And in doing that, you're liberating them of this constant pain because now there's someone to share. But you're not superimposing your ideas onto them. You're letting
mm,
them be, you're letting them be, uh, you know, on their own journey, but at the same time, you're staying present with that love. So that's the ironic thing is we think that, oh, if I'm nice to others or if I'm kind or whatever, it's for the benefit of others, but it's really for our own benefit because when we're not judgmental, when we're not critical, we feel very peaceful.
mm.
And if you think about it, we owe that to ourselves.
So true. I mean, what can I say? Yes, yeah. Freedom and love being the same thing. And then, of course, you mentioned judgment. And how do we get there? That's something that the mind is constantly. That's why I have been practicing per se, um, to just be more of that manifestation of unconditioned presence because there's no judgment. It doesn't judge. The mind's constantly judging something or someone, or it's, I mean, constantly. It can't stop. So what do you in this case, we just kind of, what I do is just observe and I don't engage with it because I know it's the nature of the mind anyway. It does it automatically. I can't help it. So I just kind of let it be. Is that something that you have experienced too? In the relationship with your clients, just see that they are themselves even, and kind of not engaging that judgment so it doesn't become something that you are part of, in a sense of them and I mean, now you're part of it, being judged, and now the witness of judgment, and then you become itself. Whatever we are present to, in a way, we become that. So how do we create this day so we can become a lot more graceful in a way when it comes to judgment? Because it's not an easy thing to do.
Yes, it is the nature of the mind. It is the nature of the ego. Um, and there's definitely tools we can use, like the very effective tool that you were talking about, where there is, yes, there is still that judgment or noise, right?
Yeah.
But there is the ability to be non-judgmentally present and watching without detachment. So that's definitely a very helpful tool. I teach all my clients that, and I think it's a must-have for everyone, because the mind can get very
Yeah.
out of control, right? In that regard, like you said.
Yeah.
Um, but there is definitely a place we can get to where it's not as judgmental. So the mind judges when it doesn't feel safe, when it feels like something is how it should not be, something that needs to be changed or need to be controlled. There's, again, techniques in hypnosis and inner child and parts work where we create not just space from that noise, but to actually help the brain feel safe enough, help the psyche feel safe enough that it doesn't need to create this noise. So there could be one of several things going on. So I'll notice with, for instance, with kids, right, that were, everything goes back to childhood, but were kids that were not made to feel safe, right? Let's just say there was, parents were always fighting. There was just always like clutter in the house. They were getting evicted and they had to pick up and move every 3 months because a new landlord was kicking them out. What they found is that judgment or noise in the mind is how they help to distract themselves from the reality of what was going on. So before I teach them non-judgment, or I teach them to detach, or, tell them, that's something we have to change, I first have to see what it was helping them with, right? What was it helping them to do? If we can create more safety there, we can do some inner child work, give them a stable home in which they grew up, then the need for this judgment will fall away. There could be many other reasons. There could be boredom. They were maybe very creative kids sometimes put in school where it was too structured, it was too slow, it wasn't moving at the pace they wanted. So they created like a fantasy or like another world in their minds. And now they're having a hard time detaching from it. And that world is noisy in order to keep the boredom at bay. So there could be so many factors at play. But yes, we can get to that place where the judgment can actually be very minimal. When we feel fully safe, we don't feel like judging it. We really do perceive it as extra work that we're having to do, and it can get very, very quiet in there. So that is really what we're after, is this kind of like very peaceful existence where there's not as much need for judgment because we feel so inherently safe. If anyone has had that experience where they fully trusted a partner or fully trusted a parent when they were little, and they were just like fell into the arms of their mom and it felt so safe, there was no judgment, there was no thought, maybe even for hours, like we lost track of time, or we're working on something very creative that we love and we're in a flow state. There's no judgment at that time. There's discernment. There's oh, I could put it here and it could be even better. That's not judgment. That's more of a, like I said, it's more of a discernment. But judgment, which feels very tight and it feels very exhausting, that can definitely, be reduced or, minimized with a deep spiritual work, such as the work that I do, which is a combination of spirituality and hypnosis and parts.
And I love that. I have to tell you, there's coming science and spirituality coming together. It's just a wonderful mix. When you speak of safety, that is exactly what happens, what feels like when there's no judgment. There's that sense of peace because we're feeling safe. And I wonder how most of us can achieve that in the reality that we are in, the shared reality in this world with so much conflict. It seems to me, I don't watch TV, I don't know much of what's happening out there, but I do hear people around me to make comments about that, wars and all that. So is that something that we can also detach from, Samy? and find refuge within. I always go for that inner space. Like there must be something that we can find within that it's safe, that place that it's untouched. And I think, I mean, it's not even a thought, it's a feeling, it might be just a perception that that place exists. Because I noticed how I tend to navigate this reality. It's always feeling safe, but not from the outside. There's something about in me that grounds me and always brings me to this moment again in a very positive way. But it's not has nothing to do with the outside. So, but I'm aware that it is, the world exists and there's a lot of things happening. So how do we, for some people who are still engaging with the outside world and feeling unsafe, is that something that you also always recommend, to go back within, always find refuge within?
Yes, there is the inner refuge, which is this probably the strongest way to create that sense of groundedness. There also might be some reframing that needs to happen about the external world. Some
Mm,
of the things we may need to understand is that, there is a lot of the population that is living very reverted to their pure biology. In countries where we see a lot of, like, power hungry dictatorships, or we see, this kind of very barbaric behavior that's void of compassion for, people, we have to see that that is their very animalistic, very territorial, very power hungry part of them at play. So if we can recognize that that's their biology, and kind of try to understand that by judging it so harshly internally,
mm,
we're not actually able to change it externally. The only way to create change is to first have acceptance for what is. That includes what's going on outside. Because if we're so busy judging it, then we're kind of giving this command to our brains that I want you to just hate what's going on. So the
yeah,
brain will give us a lot of resources for
yeah.
hate. But if we step back and accept, then our brain can go into this space where it's like, oh, this is already perfection, but let's just see, like, how else I can play with it. And that's how we can create, we can write books about it. We can create awareness about it. We can give speeches. We can create, like, thought provoking social media. We can travel to those countries and help. So, but we can't even get to that place if we're stuck in judgment, because then we're just doing this very temporary thing of pushing away pain. And when we create change because we're tired of the way things are, that only works until things get bearable, and then we just don't want to do anything anymore. That's
Right.
not a very sustainable way of doing things. It's kind of like the same thing as if I go to the gym because I hate the way I look. Well, the second I start to look okay, I'm going to lose the motivation to go to the gym. There has to be something deeper. And that's what we have to do with the external world
Mm,
too. First acceptance, then change.
Oh, I love that. Acceptance and then change. Right. It creates already that sense of safety, of peace, that from there we can see clearly, of course. So you wrote a post titled, Why Being Hated Feels Easier Than Being Loved. That really, yeah, I had to kind of stop, and how is this possible? So I guess the question for you, what makes hate feels easy than love?
Mhm. Well, there's several different reasons, and some of them I didn't talk about in this post. But the first is negative bias. So we naturally have a negative bias. We tend to focus on what's wrong rather than focus on what's right. It's important for survival. So if we can be sure that someone hates us, then we can prepare appropriately. So it's almost safer to assume I'm hated until somebody gives me a really strong reason that I'm loved or not hated. That way I can always be on guard, which my primitive brain might help save my life somehow, right?
Mm,
Because I'll be
wow.
prepared for any kind of potential danger. So that's one reason. Another one is just past programming, right? Because we've had negative experiences and we focused on them more heavily than positive experiences. Now it just feels more consistent with our image, our view of the world and of ourselves and of others, to just assume that I'm hated rather than I could be loved. Third is, to be loved, we have to actually be vulnerable. We have to allow
Mm,
ourselves to leave all these beautiful things about ourselves that we were denied, right? Either we were told by others we're not good enough, or we told ourselves for so long that we're not good enough. that in order to accept love, we have to almost revert back to that childlike state when we were so hopeful, when we thought we deserved love, when we thought love wouldn't be denied to us. And for a lot of us, that feels very painful. So let's just say that I'm used to being mistreated, even though I feel like I want to be treated better. If I meet a guy that's very nice to me, I'll immediately distrust it. And I'll be like, oh, he's probably just a loser that just,
Right.
that
Yeah.
probably just
Yeah.
liked every
Yeah.
girl. Or he's probably
Yeah.
just a pushover. That's why he likes me. Or,
Mhm.
I might make up all of these stories. But the truth is, being loved like that, the way that this, man might be willing to love me, it might take me back to that idea of unconditional love that I was denied so long. So it would remind me, it would be a constant reminder of the pain that I went through when I didn't receive love all of those times. So it almost feels like a betrayal of self, of my past self, to allow myself to be loved now. It's a very twisted concept, but
Wow.
it
Yeah.
all makes sense when we think about consistency and how important it is to our primitive brain. So those are some of the reasons, and there were a few more that I talked about, but I think mainly, these would be the reasons why it feels easier. As sad as that sounds, it feels easier to be hated because then we at least know what to do. We're like, okay, that I know how to deal with. I know how to put up my walls. I know how to defend myself. I know how to face disappointment. But love, that's like so scary because I don't know how to deal with that. I haven't had that since I was a baby. So what do I do with this? It's very unknown. It's very uncertain.
Wow. So we have actually not just forgotten what love is, but we don't know what love is. That's what it from that concept, right, Sammy? There's no reference for love, and it feels very unfamiliar, far from what we know what our reality is. That is very sad to hear, isn't it? And I think it has been part of my experience here, of course. I remember feeling this way. Not, I don't know about being hated that I thought this way. I'm trying to, when I read the your article, I was just trying to kind of recall the experiences and the memories. If I ever thought that way, that was easier to be hated. Maybe I didn't have words to express those feelings then, but now it makes sense. I remember it was very easy to be sad. It was okay. Like I didn't mind being depressed, sad, feeling whatever, those states of mind, they were very, let's say, dark. It was almost like familiar. It was okay to feel that way. But I didn't know that that meant that it was easier to feel hated. Wow.
Usually think of it more not as an easier that it feels good, but think of it more in the sense of you might be a lot quicker to believe someone hates you, like a boss or a coworker or a boyfriend or an
Yeah.
ex. It's a lot easier. Like I would be more inclined to believe it
Uh,
rather than love. Someone would have to prove it over and over before you'd let
mm,
yourself believe it. So that's how more of how I mean. Not easier as in
right,
like I
right.
gravitate towards it, but more in the sense of I would be much more inclined to believe, that someone doesn't like me. And of course, I'm using the word love and hate to kind of describe extremes, but it's all on a spectrum. So I might be more willing to believe that somebody did gossip about me than that fact that someone talks really nicely about me. That someone might have to actually, two or three people might have to actually come up to me and be like, Valeria said really nice things about you, right?
Yeah.
And I'd
Yeah.
be like, oh, that's nice. But if even one person was like, oh, that's not what Valeria said, my mind will go into overdrive thinking, oh my God, yes, she probably is this and that. And right, it's going to do a lot more work there than it will to convince me that you actually like me, right? So that's
Uh,
the type of thing that I'm talking about.
right. That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense because it's the reality reflecting belief systems. So if whatever I believe in, it's so much easier for me to be attracted to because it's already here. So it's a confirmation of that. Of course. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Wow, belief systems are really powerful, Sammy?
Yeah.
Very, very powerful. And those kinds of belief systems, of course, they come from trauma. That's the work you do too. Um, you actually write this in, I think it's in the article. You say part of trauma work is really being able to accept the positive emotions as well as the negative without needing to get rid of any of them. So it goes back to that balance too. It feels like a balance. I call the dance, but it's being clear enough where we don't need to judge as much. There's no heavy emphasis or pull toward the positive or the negative. We are just kind of in between in a way. Is that what you meant by that, Samy?
Yes, that's exactly right. And a good example of that would be what we were talking about earlier, where if I believe that somebody said something about me, right, one of the ways that we are unable to sit with our emotions is we feel like we need to take action right away, right? Because the emotion is just so
Yeah,
terrible. We don't want to feel it. We don't want to
yeah,
feel the emotion of betrayal. So we immediately do something to fix it. Either we repress it or we take action. Like, I'm not talking to that person anymore. They said this about me. But we take no time to sit with the emotion, to be present with the emotion, and being like, wow, I'm feeling really betrayed because this person I thought loved me, but they actually hate me. Let me first just sit with that and see what that feels like. Because if I
mm,
move away from this emotion too quickly, get into a new relationship or break up with this person, then I've denied that part of me that's feeling this way. Any alone time with me, right? I want my emotions to have a moment to speak, to tell me how they feel, to move through the body, right? For
mm,
me to like allow them to basically to surrender to them. So I like to do that work, for a few hours at least, if not for a few days, after something like that happens. That's also what I mean by, not pushing away any emotions, is to actually being present with them before taking any action on them. And that's I think the step that a lot of us miss.
we do. We tend to run from them, escape, numb emotions, because especially when they are very powerful and they're negative. Or do you would you say that all emotions are trying to say something, that there is a message behind every emotion, or some of them are not, we don't need to give attention to, we don't have to listen to them?
I really make it a point to listen to all emotions. I know in the beginning when you first start this work, there's not enough time because if you listen to every single thing, they would just flood you. But after doing this work for a while, now I'm getting to that point where myself, I can listen to even the tiniest of emotions and I can say, oh, I know what this is. This could be the disfranchised voice of my aunt that always said, oh my God, you shouldn't do this. That's shameful. What would this person think? Oh my God, that's where this emotion's coming from. How interesting. And I'm able to, give it a color, a shape, put a label to it, put a face. All of that process is really a part of non-judgmental witnessing, right? Because we're just staying present with it, we're noticing it. So I like to do that with all emotions because they all have some message. It's just sometimes the message is not clear, so some people are like, oh, this is just a useless emotion. I don't
Yeah,
know like
yeah,
why it's
yeah,
coming up, it
yeah.
doesn't even make sense, but somewhere in there it makes sense, or it wouldn't be happening. Our brain is a very efficient machine.
Mm,
If it's bringing up something,
mm,
it
mm.
has some sort of relevance. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Ah, wow. Uh, that is that's insightful to hear. So all emotions, they carry messages, and they are there for a reason. That's powerful, Sammy. Wow, that sounds also like a lot of work, doesn't it? There's, doing the healing work, or the work of becoming a more clear and lighter and peaceful human being. It's just work, isn't it? It's paying attention. It's becoming a lot more aware in a deeper way. Um, that is, I try not to think that way in a sense, because I'm thinking here, when do we play then? When we're free to play, because there's always so much going on. But it feels to me like the present moment is it's free from all of it. It's free from thinking, not just judgment, but thinking in general. It has a different flavor to it, to be present, right, Sammy? I guess that
Mhm.
dispels all of the work of trying to analyze and find the details.
The details come on their own when you just sit with the emotion. So you're not
Right.
analyzing it. It's more like little downloads of it and
Mm,
you stay present with it. Because one of the things that I'm very mindful of and very conscious of when I say I'm being present, but then I'm saying I have to detach myself.
Yeah.
Part of the attachment to that emotion is part of my presence. That's my form of being present with the present moment. It's not just allowing myself like this really free space and saying, oh, like this thought is bad, therefore I'm free of it, and that's real
Yeah.
freedom to me. For me, being present is being present with that negative emotion as well, right? And if I'm
Yeah.
detaching from it, I'm still doing a lot of work, because even detaching and witnessing is work. But this is much easier because that way you don't have to constantly do it. You do it for a little bit and it gets quieter and quieter in there because it got listened to. Think of it like a lot of emails when you open your inbox. The more emails you open and delete, the less there will be. I mean, it's just a numbers game. Emotions are the same way. The more we listen to them, we kind of create a habit of listening, and then we can process them a lot faster. And we kind of know what they're trying to say. So it's not like we have to keep on doing it, keep on doing it. It just becomes more reflexive, and then it's more natural. And maybe it takes, I don't know, a couple of years of work, but I feel like if it sets us up really nicely for the next 40, 50 years, it's not a lot of time. It's like 1% of our life.
Yeah.
1% of our life to have that kind of peace and that connection with not just our favored part of ourselves, but all parts of us. That's amazing. Because all of these inconveniences, or these inconvenient parts, actually have a lot more in them than we know. So these parts that are noisy or creating noise that we're trying to create distance from, once we get to know them and we heal them, they actually have all of those aspects that we love. They have freedom, they have creativity, they have joy, but it's just being blocked because of that fear. So if we can help them through the fear, then we can actually connect with ourselves at a much deeper level.
Yeah. That resonates true. And what I wonder is, how do we distinguish emotions, which sounds to me like it's mental concepts, ideas, and the stories we tell ourselves, from sensory perceptions like feelings when something's not right, not well within the body? Do you distinguish them, emotions and feelings per se?
Uh, yes, but I feel like it's kind of a jumbo in there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll have a trigger, and there'll usually be a sight or a smell attached to it, and there'll be a feeling, and then there'll be like a gut feeling. So I don't try to separate them too much. I just try to be present with it, and just feel where it comes up. Sometimes the body will be louder, sometimes the mind will be louder, at other times the visual memory might be louder. So it just depends on what's naturally coming up, and just staying present for that. And we're not doing it really to have aha moments. What we're really doing it for is to just, again, that presence, creating that presence, healing and loving, and the insights just come as a bonus, or the analytical part of it. We get an analytical understanding as a bonus, but that's not the primary goal. The primary goal is to create safety and communication.
So the message of being open is just incredibly powerful. And thank you for that. As a speaker, deliver that message really well and clearly. So I appreciate that. And almost at the end, and I have to ask you this that I ask everyone: what is one message, if there is one, from the conversation we had today, wish all viewers, everyone to take, everyone who watches this video to take with that be?
I think from today, my most powerful message would be to not treat emotions like they're just an inconvenience or disfranchised thoughts. They usually have a message. They are meant to help you navigate. That's why the whole limbic system was put in our brain, so that we can actually connect with our emotions and unite us. So the more we can listen and be present and take that time, the more we would end up with a more fulfilling and joyous life.
Yeah, yes. I love that. It really resonates and is a reminder for me every time I try to just watch them, watch these feelings and emotions, to perhaps not to engage, but to listen. And I love that message, not to push anything away. Right. Thank you so much again, Samy, for your presence here with me today, for this space that we create of, to me, sacred. So, but before we say goodbye, where can we find more information about you, what do you do, your services, and future projects?
That would be my website, don'twaittolive.com.
Wonderful. And I'll have that on your video interview profile. Thank you so much again for your presence, and we'll talk soon again. Bye for now,
Thank
Samy.
you. Bye.
Bye.